Hi, I'm Dave Harris, and this is the second of my dissertation literature review tips for dissertation writers struggling with literature review and the scholarly literature. This is titled Know Your Own Purposes, or Why Do a Literature Review? The problem is the difficulty of dissertations, and you can check out my first video, which is Use What You Know, for a little more discussion of the problem that I'm addressing in this video and the video that follows. I have a video that follows this. The literature is only a foundation for your own research. In this video, I'm going to talk about knowing your own purposes and what is a literature review, why you would want to do a literature review. So we want to think about the literature review in the context of the dissertation. So if you're doing a literature review for your dissertation, that means you want to think about what the dissertation is for and how the literature review sits in the context of the dissertation. And it's important to emphasize on this point, especially in dealing with literature, that a dissertation is about doing original research. It's not about repeating what other people have said. It's not about going over old material. It's about producing original research. So this is your main goal. And any literature review you do and any literature that you deal with in the process should support the process of doing original research. So how can literature review support that process of doing original research? And the first question I want to address is, what does that phrase literature review even mean? Because actually the phrase literature review could be many different things. It depends on what you're doing, depends on your purpose. Dissertation writers sometimes get stuck dealing with literature review because they don't have a clear sense of what they want to do with the literature and how they're going to use it for their own research. So we want you to figure out what literature review can mean to you in different contexts so that when you're working on your dissertation, you can effectively engage with literature and the process of literature review should you be called on to do so. So there are many different kinds of literature reviews and many different ways of interpreting the phrase literature review. On the one hand, we can think of quick informal reviews. So you might want to meet with a professor to ask for assistance on your project, in which case you might do a quick informal review of their work, gather a few articles they've read, skim the articles they've read so that you can understand how to speak with them better. That's a quick process. It doesn't require any write-up. On the other hand, we might have a large and formal review, like an attempt to aggregate data. There have been hundreds, perhaps, of clinical trials with an antidepressant, and you want to see what the average result of those clinical trials is. This is what's called a meta-analysis. That's large and formal, right? It may deal with hundreds of articles. It has formal processes of analysis. It has formal processes for selecting articles. So literature review can be this quick informal thing, or it can be this large, massive, formal process. It's also, we can look at it in terms of being a process of learning, right? You go out, you gather information, you read information, you learn that information so that you can put it to use. Or it can be a presentation of material, right? You can go and write up a literature review that explains things to other people. So depending on where you are in your process, you might be doing different kinds of literature review to suit different needs that you have. For a dissertation, I think there are two kinds of literature review that are particularly noteworthy. One is what I call the summary or survey overview, and the other is the research background literature review. The summary or survey overview is a general overview of material in a field. It's not original research. It's the kind of thing that you might find in a textbook. It's the kind of thing that might be assigned for coursework in a seminar. Its purpose is to give a sense of material in a field and perhaps to find potential research questions, but it's not really judgmental. It's not analyzing so much as presenting a survey, right? The danger of this kind of literature review is that it can take attention away from your own project. It's general. It casts a wide net. You want your project to be focused, and you want to be able to focus on your project when you're working on your dissertation. So I do not recommend doing a survey or summary overview if you're working on a dissertation. I think it distracts you from your own project. Sometimes it's recommended by professors, however, so it can be a bind. By contrast to the summary or survey overview literature review, I want to recommend for dissertation writers what I call a research background literature review. This is a discussion or description of material that has influenced your own work and has guided you to the choice of your own specific research project. Its purpose, and this is usually a written work now, its purpose is to convince your readers that you're doing a good project, essentially. It's to convince your readers that you have a good theoretical foundation for your work. So it's very focused on your own project and talking about why your own project is good. Now, it does look at the literature, so it's a literature review, but it's about your own project. The danger for this project is essentially none. I think that there is no real danger to engaging in this if you're working on a dissertation, right? Try and explain how your work comes out of the literature. I highly recommend this for any dissertation writer, even if somebody's telling you to do a survey review. The survey review will distract you from your work. This kind of a review will focus you on your own project. This is also the kind of review that's included in almost all published literature, the discussion and the citation of other sources. It's in almost very much published literature. It's what the APA manual, the American Psychological Association publication manual, calls the background, and it's very common. So good thing to work on. I want to briefly mention another kind of literature review that might be appropriate for some dissertations. And I mentioned before the large formal literature review that is original research in its own right, like a meta-analysis. I mentioned aggregating the results of clinical trials. This is a large-scale project that's meant to generate original research. It's the kind of thing that could be a dissertation in and of itself. If you do this kind of literature review for your entire dissertation, then you're going to end up also writing what I call a research background literature review. That is to say, a description of how you arrived at the importance of the project that you're working on. There's a book on literature reviews that I really dislike, so I'm not going to cite them, but I am going to quote them because they put in a footnote this precise issue while they simultaneously dismissed it. They said, it should be obvious that a literature reviewer, that is to say somebody carrying out a big literature review project, should be obvious that a literature reviewer needs to provide adequate background information to be able to write the literature review section of a primary research report. Now, when they say a literature review section of a primary research report, they're talking about two different kinds of literature review. The literature review section is the research background literature review, and the primary research report is the literature review research study that they're working on. So, what kind of literature review is going to serve you? What kind of literature review do you need? I think it's important to remember that the important task for the dissertation is to produce original research. In that process, you want to ask how the literature is going to help you, how spending your time reading the literature is going to help you. My recommendation, 1, work on a research background literature review. Work on explaining how your project relates to research that other people have done. My recommendation number 2 is to avoid summary or survey overviews. Don't spend your time trying to read everything. Focus on your project. That's it. Thank you very much for watching. I have 2 other videos in this series. The first video is to use what you know. The last video, which follows this one, is that the literature is only a foundation for your own research. If you found this useful, I have a book which describes these issues in more detail. I encourage you to go out and get a copy. Literature Review and Research Design, a Guide to Effective Research Practice. It's available from Routledge, available now online, maybe in your bookstore if I'm lucky. And thank you again for watching. I hope you watch my other videos too.